We're in the beginning of December, and as you know, it is holiday market season. I went to 2 markets. At the first market, I bought these papers, which are handmade. They're pretty small. We have 10 sheets of 6 by 9 inches watercolor paper. It's made by this Montreal company, which is called Retail. If you're in Montreal, they have their own studio on Saint Laurent Street, which is like the main street in Montreal. You can buy their products there. They also give classes, and they're very original. Their papers, they're like a work of art in themselves. I have bought some of their papers in the past, but I have never tried them so far because I'm quite intimidated by them. They're so pretty. So here are the papers that I bought in the past. We have different colors. Some of them have flecks of fibers. They use recycled fabrics to create these papers. So you have different colors. I've seen on their Instagram that they sometimes use plants and flowers to create different types of paper. So it's always super interesting. All of this to say, I learned that they created some watercolor paper, which are pretty thin, very smooth textured. It feels like a hot press paper. I also bought a watercolor mixing palette. I just couldn't resist. There's different sizes of wells. These are pretty shallow, but I think it's gonna be okay to mix. I can see this becoming an addiction or a collection. Yeah, but how can you resist? So I'm gonna use it for sure later. My boyfriend bought this beautiful mug. I'm a bit jealous. It's so colorful. I don't even know how they created this pattern. I know that the mug is like handmade like this. It's not done with a turning wheel. It's done by hand pressing. I don't know how it's called. In French, it's called façonnage. There's that. It's very pretty. And I bought some earrings from my favorite Montreal jeweler, which is called Horace. So I bought these 2 first ones here. I don't know if you can see. So pretty. So there's that. Now we're gonna try this paper. We'll see how it goes. I am working on this picture, which I took when I was up north. It's going to be part of my series if it turns out well. I've been wanting to do a close-up shot for a long time. I thought it was pretty interesting with the shapes and the colors and the lighting. I started working on this here. So far I kept the colors pretty light. Yeah, I just wanted to place the main shapes first, and then we'll see what we end up with. One other thing I wanted to say about this paper is that contrary to the other types of paper that they make, this one is made out of scraps of cotton paper, because one of my questions was, is this paper 100% cotton? So the answer is yes. Let's try it. We're gonna continue the drawing that I started. So I just moved to my indoor light setup because it's starting to get dark out. But I just wanted to talk to you about my first impressions of this paper. I haven't used it with water yet, so I think maybe later on I should try one just with watercolor. But I wanted to try this paper in the style that I'm doing right now, which is with watercolor pencils and Inktense pencils. And so far it's very nice. Since the paper is smooth, the pencils are gliding on seamlessly. The only thing is sometimes when I press too hard, there's chunks of papers that just come out. It's not been a big problem, and I think that when I add the water, it won't even be noticeable. It's not really noticeable right now, but you can see maybe here. I don't know if you can see little white area, and I can't seem to draw on it. But I'm sure when I add the water, it's gonna fill with color and it's gonna be fine. I just woke up. Well, it's about 2:30 p.m. So I woke up an hour ago. I worked a night shift, so I finished this morning. So I slept for a few hours because I'm off today, I'm off tomorrow. So I wanted to get back into day mode. So I just woke up. I'm still in my pajamas, but we have maybe an hour of sunshine left. I wanted to work a little bit more on my painting and try to get the most out of this sun. It's the time of the day where there's a lot of light coming in, but it's not gonna last too long. So this is where I am at right now. I've loved drawing on this paper so far. It's been very nice. And now I think I'm going to start adding some paint to these white areas. It's been a few days later, and this is what we did. The only thing I want to do now is just maybe add some details here and there, and this painting would be done. It's behaving differently than the papers I'm used to. I don't know if it's because it's handmade or because of the composition of this paper. It's supposed to be 100% cotton, and I know that because that's what is written when you go to buy this paper. But if it wasn't written, I would have doubted it, because it doesn't behave like the 100% cotton papers I'm used to, but maybe it's due to the fact that it's handmade. It dries really fast, which is one thing that I was a bit surprised, because I thought that 100% cotton papers stayed wet longer. I decided to do a little test before I conclude this video, which is to compare my handmade watercolor paper with a hot press watercolor paper. So this one is the Arches hot press watercolor paper. Since it's hot press, the texture is similar as my handmade watercolor paper, which was important for me. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to do the same sketch on each paper, and then I'm going to add some watercolor. This watercolor is going to act as my base layer for my next painting, because I didn't want to waste this paper. I didn't want to just do random swatches because this paper was so expensive. I don't want to waste one sheet. I want to tell you something that I find so disappointing. In my last video, I told you about the fact that I wanted to get some pencil extenders. I knew that Derwent made some pencil extenders. Somebody in the comments told me I could get them on Amazon, so that's what I did. They come in two different sizes. This gray one is a bit bigger than the black one, so I was so happy. But then, look, this is one of my Inktense from Derwent. This is the bigger size. They don't fit. It doesn't fit my Inktense, and it also doesn't fit my Albert Dürer from Faber-Castell, which is why I bought this, because these are the brands that I've been using the most. My pencils are getting the shortest, and still it doesn't work. I just find it so stupid that Derwent's products don't work with their own Derwent. Like, I thought that at least in the same brand things would fit together. Yeah, I'm very disappointed. At least this one will fit smaller ones, smaller pencils, so it fits my Caran d'Ache Watercolor too soft. So this one fits. Not much fits in this black one though, so I would have liked to have this one as a small one and then have a bigger one. So if you know about a pencil extender that fits bigger sized pencils, please let me know, because I'm very disappointed. Okay, so I did a little sketch, so I think I'm going to start with some kind of reddish color. In fact, I'm using Daniel Smith transparent red oxide, but there was a leftover color in my palette here, so it's gonna be a mix. Let's start with this part here. So I'm just gonna apply a uniform layer in this section here. So I know this paper pretty well, this Arches hot pressed watercolor paper. I've used it a few times already. So I know that I can put a lot of water on there and it's going to react well. And as you can see, it doesn't dry too fast. I can go back and work on an area where I've worked before, like here, and it's still wet, so I can still move the paint around. Let's say I want to add a darker spot here. The paint moves around a little bit, but I can add some water like I'm doing now and make the paint move a bit more. Now I'm gonna use the same color on my handmade watercolor paper, starting with the uniform layer. The difference with the other paper too is that for this one I can't put tape because the paper is too fragile. So we'll see if it buckles more. So far the paint applies pretty much the same, but I can see that it's drying faster, which is something that I noticed when I used this paper previously for my other paintings. And what if I add some darker color here? You see it's already fully dried. The paint won't spread. Let me add a bit of water just so maybe I can create some spreading action. Okay, so now that I wet it again, it spreads a bit better. So while it dries, I'm going to add a bit of pink. So I created a pink using some Daniel Smith quinacridone rose with some white gouache, which is a color that I've been using for my rocks in my latest illustrations or my latest paintings. It's not the most pronounced color, but you can still see. So I'm going wet on dry for this painting. Maybe we can try wet on wet for a smaller section, just in case it doesn't work too well. I have to say this one dries fast too, but it handles more water better. You can re-wet it and the paint re-wets and you can work it without fearing of damaging the paper. Okay, let's do the same thing with the handmade watercolor paper. I feel like this paper sometimes repels the paint or the water just a little bit, because the water moves, it doesn't stay where I put it. It's like it's not very absorbent, which is what the artist that made the paper told me too. So it's not a surprise. She said she created a paper that wasn't too absorbent. And I think I prefer a more absorbent paper. I feel like the hot press watercolor paper too repels the paint sometimes in the water. So maybe it's just not, maybe it's a property of the texture. I don't know. Now I want to mix a green, maybe a brighter green. So I'm going to use my Daniel Smith green gold. I'm gonna mix it with this color here, which I'm not too sure what it is. This is pretty bright. Yeah, let's use this. And we're gonna just do some of the moss areas. Okay, now I want to try a wet on wet technique just to see what happens. So I think I'm just gonna wet an area here in the middle. So my water is a little bit yellow, which is good, I think, because it allows me to see where I put it. And now I want to start introducing some blues to my painting. It's a dark blue. I hope you weren't looking forward to see a really bright blue. I want to keep with my color palette that I've been using for this project. This is why I'm using this type of blue, because I've painted the water and the sky of my previous paintings with this color. I think I like this as wet on wet. It dries a bit slower because I put more water, and I'm excited to see how it's gonna dry. But so far it's pretty fun. So we'll do the same thing with this one now. After putting a layer of paint only, I have to say I'm pleasantly surprised with the handmade watercolor paper. I feel like the colors look a bit more vibrant on this one compared to this one. Still, they're pretty similar. I think maybe it's just that part that is a bit more vibrant here. The difference that I noticed is that this one dries a lot quicker than this one, but this one still dries quicker than my other papers that I'm more used to using, such as the Arches cold press watercolor paper, which is very thick, and I find that I like that better when they dry a bit slower. Yeah, you can see the areas where the paint dried and I put some paint on top. You can see that it didn't really reactivate the paint that was under, and you can see like some areas like this, but you can see the same thing on this one. As for granulation, I see it more on the Arches hot press watercolor paper compared to the handmade watercolor paper. And yeah, so it's been a nice experience to use both of them. I think that I like the result better on this one so far. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to add some watercolor pencil on top and maybe reactivate some areas to add a bit more dimension to these paintings, and we'll see what happens. But so far the two of them are pretty equal, which I did not expect, to be honest. I expected this one to be significantly better than this one. Oh, another notable thing is that this paper did not buckle. I finished adding a layer of pencil, and there's one last thing I'd like to do after this is to add some water in some areas just to see how it's going to react. But I see a big difference between the two paintings. On this one, I feel like the pencil sometimes had a smoother finish. It wasn't easier to apply the pencil because this paper felt a little bit more waxy compared to this one. So sometimes I had to press a bit harder for the pencil to apply to the paper, and then I would press the same way on this paper and the color would be too dark, too intense, because you don't have to press as much. And maybe you see what I mean by waxy a bit. Look at how these lines are. They're pretty smooth. It's like they glide on there. You don't see a lot of texture. But for this one here, you see way much texture. So it's just a bit different. I'm not sure which one I prefer. I think the colors pop a bit more on this one, but it might be just me. Just let me know what you think. I'm thinking to add a bit of water here just to see how the colors mix together. I don't want to add too much, just like in some areas here and there. And do the same thing on each painting so I don't forget what I did. So I move from one painting to another. I felt sometimes when I applied certain colors that, for example, this kind of sienna, when I applied it on the handmade watercolor paper, the colors were brighter than when I applied it on this arches paper, which is very strange. If you know a little bit more about handmade watercolor paper and you can explain some of my questioning, feel free to let me know in the comments, because I don't know much about this, so maybe there's simple explanations for all of my questions. So when I'm adding the water, I'm quite careful not to add too much of it, because I still want the pencil lines to show through, because I feel like that's one of the advantage of watercolor pencils, is the extra texture that you don't get with regular watercolors. So I want to make sure that I preserve it. I feel like with the handmade watercolor paper, it's a bit less predictable, which I guess makes sense since it's handmade. But when I add the water, sometimes I feel like here it just removed a chunk of color, and I don't know why, but that's just what happened. And I feel like with the arches watercolor paper, the color reactivates really well. I don't need that to add a lot of water and it reactivates. Compared to this one, the handmade one, sometimes you have to work the colors a bit more before they reactivate. So that's another difference. Here we go. I think that's what concludes this video for this week. I hope that you enjoyed it. As I said before, if you have any information about handmade watercolor papers and what to expect, any answers to my questions, let me know in the comments below. I'm very interested to try more handmade watercolor papers. It was my first time, so didn't know what to expect that much. But overall, I liked it. And as you saw, I started this one also, which I did not finish in this vlog. I will finish it, I don't know when, whenever I can. I'll leave you with a close-up of the two paintings that I did just now, that I just finished. Let me know if you see any differences between the two, if you have a favorite between the two and why. I feel like this was such a fun experiment. I'm wondering if I should cut the edges on the arches paper just so it looks similar, even more similar to the handmade watercolor paper. I tried to keep the sizes similar, but as you see, there's a white edge here and this one doesn't. So maybe I should cut, I don't know. I think I will leave them like this for now, and later on I might decide to cut the edge. And I'll also show you a close-up of the first painting that I did using this handmade watercolor paper. So that's it. I hope that you're enjoying your holidays, and I will see you soon. Take care.